So we start off with the three principles that make up the Xero trust. So in practical terms, it's really a transition from the former position of implicit trust, assuming everything that sits inside a corporate firewall is safe, to a model that assumes that the breach is assumed, and also that looking to verify explicitly the security status of things like identity, endpoints, networking, and any other resources really based on all available signals and data. It relies on contextual real-time policy enforcement to achieve the least privileged access required for an end user, and to try and minimise those risks. So starting with assumed breach, this really means using redundant security mechanisms, collecting system telemetry, using it to detect anomalies, and wherever possible connecting that insight to automation, and that will allow you to prevent, respond and remediate in real time. Next, we've got verify explicitly. So this really means that we should be examining all relevant aspects of an access request instead of just assuming trust based on one single thing, something like a network location. We want to examine the identity of the person or device that is asking, where they're coming in from, what the network is, and then also the resource that they're trying to access, and then apply threat intelligence and analytics around that to add context to that request. And then use least privileged access. So, we've kind of spoken about this. There are features and sort of Active Directory and tools from Microsoft that can help with this. So things like just in time or just enough access. But it's really about asking yourself sort of questions around the security policies that you've employed to adapt to what the specific risks are for that individual access. So, just because I'm an administrator of a domain, for example, it doesn't mean I need to have access to everything all of the time. So this could mean limiting my access specifically to my role within my IT organisation. If I'm working in a support team, I don't need privileges that provide access to sensitive financial and HR data unless I'm providing support around that data. If you're a CTO or a CISO, do you really need to be part of admin groups? Are you really going to be, requiring permissions to go and make fixes and changes? It's about looking at what are the activities that an individual performs on a day-to-day basis, and then applying specific privileges around that. We've mentioned a couple of other technologies. You've got PIM as well, which is privileged identity management. That will help identify the accounts that have got those elevated privileges, and then you can start to understand who's got access to what, and when these accounts are being used. So in terms of the components of the Xero Trust model, the Xero Trust approach really should extend, throughout your entire digital estate. It's not looking at one thing. It's an integrated security philosophy, an end-to-end strategy, rather than just kind of one thing that the security team do, for example. And the way we do this is by implementing Xero Trust across 6 foundational elements, which they refer to as their pillars. Each of these is a source of signal, or a control plane for enforcement, or a critical resource that needs to be defended. So within this diagram that we're looking at now, it's a simplified diagram of Xero Trust, security with a security policy enforcement engine sitting in the middle. That engine is delivering protection by analysing the signals that are coming in, applying those policies, and then using things like threat intelligence. So Julie spoke about earlier about all the information, all the trillions of signals that come into Microsoft. All of that information is used by them, to build threat intelligence and then feed that back into their products. So just by using those products, you're getting access to that data, or certainly the benefits of that data, and the capture of that. So looking at these 6 pillars, the first one is identity. So whether that represents people, services, IT devices, when an identity attempts to access a resource, you want to verify that identity with strong authentication, and then ensure access is compliant and typical for that identity. One of those principles following least privileged access principles. Then we've got devices. So once an identity has been granted access to a resource, data can start to flow towards a variety of different endpoints. That could be IoT devices, smartphones, bring your own device, devices managed by partners, customers. It could be an on-premise workload, it could be cloud-hosted servers. And that diversity, which you multi-cloud earlier, can create a massive attack surface area for malicious actors that are trying to attack and gain access to your data. So we need to monitor and enforce that device health and then make sure it's compliant before we allow any secure access. Then we've got data. Ultimately, security teams are protecting data. Where possible, data should remain safe even if it leaves the device, an application, whether it leaves your infrastructure or your network, the things that are already in control of the organisation. You need to classify, label and encrypt your data and restrict access to it based on those attributes. Then we've got applications. So applications and APIs, they're brilliant. They provide an interface into which the data is consumed. These could be based on-prem. They could have been lifted and shifted to cloud workloads, or they could be modern, software as assurance applications. Applying controls and technologies to discover use of things like shadow IT, ensuring that appropriate in-app permissions are in place, gate access based on real-time analytics, and monitor for abnormal behaviour and control what a user can do really within that environment. So for infrastructure, whether that's on-prem, cloud-based, VMs, containers, microservices, these represent a critical threat vector and perhaps one that all of us from a security point of view are probably most comfortable with. Used to sort of putting our crown jewels, if you like, from a technology point of view into our physical data, blocking everyone out with a firewall. In terms of access, we're going to be looking at versions of infrastructure configurations, just-in-time access to those to all try and harden up our defences. We want to use telemetry to potentially be able to detect attacks or anomalies, and we want to be able to automatically block and flag risky behaviour and take protective actions. And then finally, for network, ultimately, data is accessed over a network infrastructure. Networking controls can provide critical controls to enhance the visibility of where our data is moving, and then also help prevent attackers from moving laterally across our network. We talk a lot about segmenting networks and deeper going into things like microsegmentation and deploying real-time threat protection, end-to-end encryption, monitoring and analytics. So those